Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is my review for The Americans, Season 3, Episode 9, Do Male Robots Dream of Electric Sheep? And this episode just, wow, what an episode this was. I mean, most of this episode was one conversation, but it was such an impactful conversation and such a memorable conversation, and really, again, showed the theme of how they do such bad things, but yet they feel bad about it, and I definitely really love that about this episode. And that's one of the many things I love about this episode. There were a lot of things I love about this episode, and this was by far the best episode of the season. By far. Absolutely loved it. Such a dark episode as well. There was no humor in this episode or anything. It was just such a dark episode, and I love that. So let's just get into it because it was an amazing episode, as usual. So we start with Elizabeth. She's waiting for Hans, and she tells him that she thinks Todd may have seen him, and he says it's not possible, but she says he came down off the ladder too soon. He asks if she's sure, but she says that means it's all over. She says she can't take the risk, and he says he wants to serve the cause, but she says it has to be in other ways, and she walks away. And I really felt bad for Hans because, Hans and Elizabeth, they really had a great connection, but unfortunately, their whole partnership has come to an end, and you really do feel bad for Hans. I mean, he really cared about Elizabeth, and just to see that whole thing is over, you really do feel bad for the guy. So at the travel agency, Phillip comes in and tells Elizabeth that the FBI found the bug in Gad's pen, and he says Gabriel doesn't know yet. He doesn't know, anything about the bug, and he says there's more. He says Martha now knows about him because the person they brought in to investigate was him. And now, Elizabeth is very concerned with this. Obviously, she's worried that he told her that he's Soviet, but he says that she does not know that he's a Soviet, and Elizabeth asks what they do, but he says nothing now, and she asks for how long, and he says he'll see. He says he's going back tonight, but she says he can't, and Philip says Martha hasn't told anyone, says he knows because he trusts her, which is a pretty big thing there, that he actually trusts Martha, and Elizabeth is pretty hurt about this. I mean, there are points where it seems like he trusts Martha more than Elizabeth, and Philip's waiting in the car, and he doesn't even seem to really care much, and he hears an engine crank, and he looks at the lights in the apartment window. He goes inside, and there's Martha cooking dinner, and she greets him with a smile, and she says she made him homemade pasta sauce. She tells him to come taste it. He doesn't, says it's perfect. The phone rings, and she asks him to stir the sauce. The call is from Child Services, and she says the children are wonderful, but they reconsidered, and I like that she can see that he doesn't want to adopt because, she needs to understand that he didn't want to. So I like that she actually listened to him and didn't adopt. I thought she was going to go ahead and do it on her own, but no, she actually listened to him, which I was happy about. So basically, she basically tells them that it's just not the right time for them. She says she'll let them know if things change. She ends the call and tells them that they can't think about kids right now, and it's true, they really can't. And she tells them it's okay. She says she's fine. She says she just needed to know, and now she does. And she says it's okay, and he says yeah. And she asks him to sit. He serves up salad for them. She pours them some wine, and he thanks her. She offers a toast to turning the page. He drinks to that, and she says the wine is good, and then she says she thinks Gad won't outlast this investigation, and says he attacked the male robots. And she says being sent out for repairs. He asks about Gene, and she says he's the computer specialist, and she says it was his idea to install the male robot, and she tells him to eat before it gets cold, and I thought that was a good way to start the episode overall, just their conversation. You can definitely see that these two are getting close. Like, not just... This is no longer just Philip acting. He really is starting to care about Martha, which I just find to be very interesting, definitely. I mean, just the fact that this all... I knew it was eventually coming. I knew eventually he would connect with Martha, but now, I didn't think that would be now. I thought now would be the time when she's starting to get suspicious and things like that. But no, they're in they're the best they've ever been, really. While him and Elizabeth are terrible right now. So Stan meets Oleg in secret to talk more about Nina, and he tells Stan she might be right about Zinaida, and says he hasn't found out anything specific, but something seems off at the Residenter, which, yeah, there definitely is something off about her. He says there's a way they can find out what's actually going on, but it's very risky, and he says if they got caught, it's very risky, and they don't really know if they should do it. So Hans then finds Todd working in the supply room at school, and obviously he's really upset with what happened about with Elizabeth, and of course Elizabeth said Todd was the reason why. So he takes out his anger and he ends up shooting Todd in the eye. Then his guns jam, they grapple, Hans knocks him down, chokes him to death, and it just shows what can happen to someone who's like full of anger and rage and things like that, and that really showed how angry Hans really was. And you really do feel bad for him. Definitely in that scene I felt bad for him, and I understand that this is just a disguise for to Elizabeth, but to Hans, Elizabeth he really cared about, and now that their whole thing is over, he's really upset about it. So Gabriel, Elizabeth, and Philip walk and talk about Gad, and Philip says Martha will protect him, and Gabriel agrees. Gabriel says that the center wants Philip to bug the male robot, and he says Martha won't be able to change out the tapes if they do. And Gabriel says they have other assets that can change the tapes, and Gabriel says tells the two of them to trust the organization. And it's really interesting because I wasn't really sure if they're going to trust him or if they were really going to listen to him. I didn't really know what was going to happen there. But Hans then meets with Elizabeth and says he killed Todd so he could keep working with her. And she's pretty shocked at this, obviously. He wanted to keep working with her. And now he's killed Todd, now he can work with her still. So she's shocked at first and asks if he's sure no one saw him, and he says he's sure. And Elizabeth asks if he's alright. He says it was messy and didn't go exactly as planned. She says it seldom does. He says what his people have done to the blacks in their country is wrong and they have to stop. And he says he will do whatever is asked for the cause and for her. And he's a really sweet kid. He really is. But just the fact that this is just disguise and things like that, it really is sad. So Stan works a crossword while he waits in the government building outside a meeting with several military people, and Zinaida comes out and he has a snack for her and then says they'll get room service when they go back to the hotel, and she says she wants to try a BLT, then starts to explain what it is, but he says he knows. And I thought that was kind of a funny scene, but again, she's so suspicious that basically anything she says now is suspicious. At this point, I just feel like she's playing dumb. I really do. At first, I thought she was just a fun character who just didn't really know much about American culture. But now, I just feel like she's playing dumb, and this is all acting. And, like, she definitely is a lot smarter than she's acting. I don't know what she's hiding, but you can tell she's hiding something. Just everything she says now, you can tell she's hiding something. So, anything she says, pretty much, I don't trust her. So, Elizabeth and Philip are then at the repair place for the male robot. Now, I want to say something about male robots that I find very interesting. Male robots actually were never a thing. It was something that was invented that never went through. So, I like the Americans is doing this because not everything they need to do actually happened. And this is something that could have happened. In fact, it was made. It just didn't work. And the Americans is showing what would happen if it did work. And I like that they do that because they can play around with that. And I definitely really do enjoy that. And it's really cool they're doing that. So, there are several male robots there, and he locates the right one, and they get to work, and Elizabeth tells him that it's only naturally has developed feelings for Martha, and he tells her thanks for her permission, and she says she didn't mean it like that. And you can see just their relationship right now is terrible. I mean, he is being so rude to her. I think he honestly is just sick of her. He really is. I think the reason he's so sick of Elizabeth is because of the fact that he's tired of her giving him more. He's just tired of everything that's going on. Her moving forward with the Paige thing. She's just done so much that he's pretty much just tired of her. And Martha is pretty much the new norm to him. He prefers Martha. And I just find that to be very interesting overall. So then Elizabeth goes to see where they are. She sees this light come on in an office upstairs. She creeps closer to see what's going on. She has her gun out and she opens the door and hears someone opening up a drawer. She walks into the room, finds a woman there, and this is where most of the episode takes place, is the conversation between her and this woman, Betty. The woman that played Betty, by the way, amazing actress. I don't know who she is, but wow, what an amazing actress she actually is. She gave an amazing performance in this episode, and honestly, her acting had me on the verge of tears. By far the highlight of the episode is their conversation, because they have like a very long conversation here. Now, she's telling the woman not to scream or she'll tie her up, and Phil keeps working on the male robot while she deals with the woman, but then he notices she's gone, and the woman asks if it will take long, because he didn't realize that Elizabeth had left before. So the woman asks if it will take long, and Elizabeth says she doesn't know. The woman says she hopes not. She asks if she can keep working. She says she comes in late to do the bookkeeping because she's usually alone. And she says most people don't like to work at night. She says she likes singing in the dark and feels most in tune. Elizabeth asks what she means by that. She says she feels close to her husband and his presence. And she says she doesn't feel him tonight because of her. She shows him a photo and says his name was Gil and the frame was from her sister-in-law. She says the sister never married and was a pill. She shows her another picture of her younger self, and Elizabeth says she was pretty, and then she says she was, and says her son Andy runs things now, but won't be in until morning. And she says how Gil started the shop and was a machinist and learned the trade in World War II in the Army. And she says she was a math teacher. She says there were no calculators and robots then, and says the world changes. And it honestly is a very memorable speech because it honestly does go with today, with the fact of, like, the world's changed so much. There was no cell phones in the 80s, and I just really liked her speech overall. She tells her that her husband was a Christian scientist until the war, but after he helped liberate the Jews from concentration camps, he said he had no need of those stories anymore. So Betty asks her for a glass of water, and Elizabeth tells her she needs her keys. She hands them over immediately. Elizabeth takes the phone too. She goes downstairs to check on Philip and tells him what she found. She asks how much longer. He says he's trying. She tells him about the woman's husband being in World War II, and he says the woman picked a bad time, and basically, Stan then brings Zinaida back to her hotel room, checks her around, he tells her he'll wait outside for her food to come, and she thanks him. The woman tells her that I thought that was a good scene overall. So you're kind of wondering what's going to happen here with Stan. I didn't really know what was going to happen here. So Betty tells her that she has a heart condition and asks if she came to fix something or steal, if, she came to fix her heart condition, or because, she hasn't really revealed why she's there. And they talk about their fathers, and basically Betty talks about how her dad was a farmer, and Elizabeth says her father was a coal miner. You pretty much see here that Elizabeth is not going to lie here. She's not wearing a wig. She's not wearing a wig. She is being completely honest with her. You pretty much see that she's going to be open with her, and I thought she was going to tell her the truth. I really did. And basically, she says she tells her the truth about everything, and she asks if her mom is alive and where she lives, and Elizabeth says Russia, and the woman says her English is good, and Elizabeth says she's been well trained. The woman then realizes that Elizabeth won't let her leave, and she says it's not possible, and Betty says this is not how she expected her story to end. She says she's not afraid of leaving the world and says it's better than falling down in the street or dying alone in front of the TV. She says she hates hospitals, and she says when Gil was sick, she hated seeing him there. Elizabeth looks at the bottle of heart pills and then opens it up. She pours them all out, sits down nearby, and Betty looks at her, then nods, takes several of the pills, then drinks some water. And that whole scene is just so intense because you know what's going to happen to Betty. You know that, oh my god, she's going to have to kill her. And it makes sense why she has to kill her. Because they can't, even though she's telling the woman the truth, they can't trust anyone. They're just in that situation where they can't trust anyone. And it again just shows the things that they have to do to survive and to keep their identity. And it's all just really sad, definitely. So Stan waits outside in the hall with the food tray when Zinaida hears a noise and calls his name. Oleg is in her room and says he'll put a bullet in her head if she calls out. She asks who he is. He says he's a patriot unlike her. She asks what he wants. He says for her to recant everything she said about the war in Afghanistan, and he says she has to return to Russia as a hero who has returned to her senses. He says she must do it in 2 weeks or he'll come back, and says next time there will be no talking. So Stan comes into the room with her food, and Oleg attacks him, hits him, then runs out. Zinaida runs in, calling for him, and puts a cloth on his head. And you can see that really this was just Oleg's plan. Now, here's what I think is going on. I think Zinaida is secretly working with Oleg, and she's going to help Oleg get Nina before Stan does. I don't think Oleg's working with Stan at all. I don't think Oleg trusts Stan. I don't think Zinaida trusts Stan. I think Zinaida and Oleg are working together. After that scene, that's what I think is going on. I'm very interested in seeing if that is true. So we get one quick scene with Paige and Henry in this episode. Nothing that much. We see Henry's playing a video game. Paige telling Henry to go to bed, quit playing the video game. She's reading the Bible, and it just shows how different those two really are. Henry is a lot less religious and things like that, while while Paige is very religious, and I just like seeing that overall. I thought that was really well done. So Philip has the male robot apart finally and slides the device into it. He hears noise upstairs, and Betty asks Elizabeth if she's married, and she tells her it's good to have a partner, and she says she and Gil were married twice. She says they got divorced, and he remarried, and then his wife died, and they got married again. And she says she takes a few more of the pills, and she says they no longer had sugar in their eyes. She says the second time it stuck like glue. She says they were married 27 years, the second round when he died. She says Gil would never talk about the other woman, Helen, he married, who had been her best friend. And he says he never talked about the war. She asks Elizabeth if Gil sent her, and Elizabeth says yes. She asks if he told her she's afraid of pain, and she says yes. And again, she's just being honest with her. She asks if Gil is with Helen, and Elizabeth says no. She says she doesn't want anything to happen to Andy and says that he's a good boy. And Elizabeth says it won't, then promises her he'll be safe. She asks Elizabeth if she has children, and she says yes. She asks, and she asks, and this is what you do. And Elizabeth says sometimes. She asks if she does it alone, but she says with her husband. And Betty asks why, and she says to make the world a better place. She asks Elizabeth if doing this to her, and this line just, oh my god, this line, it's so sad what she says here. And this is probably one of the most heartbreaking scenes. I'm being honest, one of the most heartbreaking scenes in American history. This is a old woman here who was completely innocent, who the only reason she was killed is because they just can't have anyone knowing their secrets. And basically, she asks Elizabeth if doing this to her will make the world a better place. She says it will. Betty says that's what evil people tell themselves when doing evil things. She's shivering. She doesn't want to take the pills, but she does it. She reaches for the last few pills. She says, she's like, I can't. I can't. And she's like breathing heavily. She's wheezing. She stares upward and then just stops breathing. She's dead. And it's just so sad. And again, she didn't want to have to do, but they just can't have anyone knowing their secrets, and it's just really sad that they had to kill her. There really was no other option than to kill her, but it just was really, really heartbreaking to see. I mean, this woman, she was honest with this woman, and this woman really cared about her story, and then she just went and killed her. It's just so sad to see, and I felt so bad for this woman. Such a sad scene, but such an impactful scene as well. Definitely really enjoyed that. That right there, just such an, especially the fact that that this one wasn't even a huge character and it was one of the saddest scenes ever, really just shows how great of a show The Americans really is. So Philip is done, wipes down the robot, tests the listening device, and Elizabeth says they'll find her body in the morning, and it'll look natural. He asks if she's okay. She's crying. She says that, and you can see that she is affected by this, which I love seeing. She's very affected. I mean, this woman told her whole story, and she feels terrible. She says they have to go pack their tools, and I thought that was just really sad overall. So Stan reports to Adderholt and Gad about the intruder in Zinaida's room. She says he checked the room first. He tells Gad he's okay except for a headache, and Adderholt says aspirin works better with beer, and Gad says they'll beef her up security. Later, Stan meets Oleg, who tells him she didn't panic, break, or confess, and Stan says maybe she was in shock, thinking she was going to die. Oleg says no one has said anything at the residential, and Stan takes some aspirin, then sips a beer. Oleg says no thanks when he offers, then asks about his head, and Stan says it's been better, and Oleg says he's sorry to hit him so hard, but smiles. He tells Stan to try it with a raw egg, then says he'll take a beer. Stan asks, didn't some part of him want to crack his head wide open? And I thought that was a good scene overall, but I just don't really think that this is a actual bonding. I think that Oleg and Zinaida are working together. So the final scene we get is between Gabriel and Philip, and this scene right here, this was amazing. Gabriel's playing Scrabble with Philip, who thinks he's patronizing him when he says good word, and Philip played Geode, and then Gabriel plays amatory, which he says means loving, and Gabriel says he loves words and their origins. He says wedlock means perpetual battle. Philip asks what he means, then he doesn't want to hear it, and Philip plays Sphinx and tells him bravo. Philip says when he first saw Elizabeth, it felt like a bolt of lightning, and says it never happened before or since, and Gabriel says Elizabeth rejected the first officer they presented her with, and he says she chose Phillip in her own way, which I thought that was a really good line overall because, I mean, we always thought that those two never really had chemistry and they just are now starting to care about each other, but in many ways, Phillip was the right choice. And Phillip says it never felt like that to him. He never really felt loved by Elizabeth. He just felt like he was randomly chosen. And Gabriel says that doesn't change. That is true. He asks if Phillip wants to tell him what's going on. He says he and Elizabeth both love him. And Phillip says the problem is Gabriel, and he's calling him out now. He says all this talk because he thinks he can wrap him around his finger. He says he trusted Gabriel, and his job was to look out for him. He says now his job is to look out for his family because no one else is going to. And it's really true what Phillip says, and that's how the episode ends. And I thought that was a great way to end the episode. You can really see that what Phillip is starting to do is really starting to annoy him. He's tired of being in this job. He's tired of having to play other parts. He just wants to be part of his family. He wants to be there for his family. He wants to provide for him. Elizabeth doesn't seem to care as much about him. You can definitely see that their relationship is starting to fade, and it seems like he doesn't care as much about Elizabeth as he does about his kids. He cares more about Martha now because he's happier with her. It's really sad overall. Gabriel, they're going to have to get rid of him. I mean, Gabriel seemed like it was going to be good bonding with him. It seemed like they were going to bond well with him and it was going to work out well, but clearly it's not working out well at all, and I really do feel bad for them that they have to get rid of Gabriel, but you got to cut him loose. It's that simple. So overall, that was just really sad there. Let's talk about Zinaida and Oleg. As I said, I think these two are working together. I think they're working together. I think that Oleg and Zinaida, they're definitely hiding something from Stan. What it is, I don't know yet, but you can't trust them. Stan is being way too trusting of them. He can't trust them, and he needs to understand that. So yeah, not too much happened in this episode, but it still was a very impactful episode. The conversation with Betty was just so great to see. My eyes were glued to the screen the whole time because I had no idea what was going to happen to her. I didn't know she was going to take the pills. I didn't know if Elizabeth was just going to kill her on the spot right there. I didn't know what was going to happen, and it was so intense, and I loved it. And that's why I love this episode so much. But overall, guys, that's it for my review of this episode. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall. By far, best episode of the season. That's it for my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for the series premiere of Big Time in Hollywood, Florida, because I want to check out the show. I heard about it. I haven't checked it out yet, but I'm going to check it out, and that'll be an next review. So I'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.